Hey guys, so it's been over a year now since Daggerheart came out. I have been playing Daggerheart as a GM for over a year. And the interesting thing about TTRPGs like this is it can take a very long time for people to really wrap their heads around a system, figure out how to play that works best for them, and, get the most enjoyment out of it. So I gave this game, glowing reviews when it first came out. The reality is, do I still think it's all that? This video is going to be a little less flashy than I usually do it, just me chatting. So when Daggerheart first came out, my verdict was that it's a great game that some people will prefer over D&D and others will prefer D&D over this. I use D&D as the comparative thing because, it's the biggest thing in the space. At the time, I said I could see myself kind of choosing between playing Daggerheart and D&D depending on just what kind of mood I was in. And I still love DMing D&D. But the reality is now, after a year, I would much rather GM Daggerheart if given the choice. If given the choice, like I sometimes don't have a choice. But it's true. For me, Daggerheart is just easier to prep and more fun to run. I almost said easier to run, but I don't know if that's true, and I'll get to that in a bit. And overall, I just find it easier to understand. Like, I've played D&D for many, many years, and I don't actually feel like an expert at it. Daggerheart, I feel, well, not an expert, I still get rules wrong and forget things all the time, but I feel much more comfortable kind of being an authoritative voice. And I think this is just a really good time to have this kind of conversation because Darrington Press have just revealed that they're releasing a bunch of new books in the future, and we have the date for one of them, the big kind of expansion, Hope and Fear, coming out May next year. And it looks to be more of the same as this. So if you like this, I think you're going to like Daggerheart moving forwards because they seem to be sticking to their guns with this kind of style and vibe. So I'm not going to tell you what is great about Daggerheart. I'm not going to tell you why you will like it or why you won't like it. I'm just going to tell you why I like it. And I think the best example to give of why it gels with me so much is my last session. I ran a one-shot for 3 of my regular players and 2 completely new people to Daggerheart. They had played D&D a little bit before, but they were not like TTRPGers by any sense. So I decided to do a one-shot, and I decided to do 0 prep. Well, almost 0 prep. Just base Daggerheart, there is less prep than something like D&D, certainly the way I play it, because the dice tell such an unpredictable story, and the players have so much more agency with the narrative that you kind of don't want to have a lot of stuff planned. Because it happens in D&D, you plan stuff and the players never do it or things don't go that way. Daggerheart is much more swingy when it comes to that stuff, but it's supposed to be. And it's why I like playing it as a GM, because I don't know where the story is going to go. I may have an idea, but I'm completely open to it branching out in completely random directions, depending on the dice and the players. That being said, I still prep a fair amount in Daggerheart, just less than D&D. But in this one shot, I decided to not do that this time because I wanted to try out the one-shot template that's in here, which is just a string of prompts that you ask your players and yourself in the moment. And I think there's going to be a whole other video on that because it's a fantastic idea and it really worked. But for this session, the only prep I did is printing off all the character sheets I needed and making sure I had all the cards in the right place, ready to go, ready for the players to create their characters. This is kind of the downside of Daggerheart. And I don't want this to be a fanboy review, so being critical about it, I have found that the paperwork situation in Daggerheart is a lot more than something like D&D. Now, this is partly also because the online digital tools aren't as well established as well. But in D&D, you can kind of just print off some character sheets and go for it. But in Daggerheart, the cards are a big thing that you have to worry about. And if you only have one deck, then you either need to print off more cards or you need to do what I did, which was take cards from existing players in an existing campaign to temporarily use in the one shot. Then I had to note down what everyone had, and the only answer to that is really to have more cards, which is more paperwork. But that is just the trade-off for having such an engaging character creation. That's where I truly think the cards are the most fun. When it comes to playing, most of my players just sleeve the cards in an A4 piece of plastic, like a character sheet. they might as well just write the cards down on a piece of paper like a character sheet. But during character creation, it feels like you're choosing a character in a video game. You're scrolling through all the options. It's really fun, especially for people new to the space. So in this one shot, I got everything together. I picked a handful of adversaries. I kind of got like a group that I printed off on one page, which, minions, standard, leaders, brutes, just so I could like throw them at the characters if needed. Then I got one big bad for that session, which was like a minor demon in this. They were level 1, but I had no idea how I was going to use them. It was just a selection of things I could use. I didn't give them names. I didn't give them stories or anything. If I had everything printed out and ready to go, I would have pretty much done zero prep. It would have taken me 5 minutes, tops. Normally in my games, when I'm running my long campaign, I do put a lot more effort into it because I enjoy that prep section of it. But I kind of now know I don't have to do that. If I run out of time or anything, I'm fine with running without prep. Now, when I sat down for this one shot, we had maybe 3 or 4 hours and we were creating characters as well, which if it was D&D, and I hate to keep comparing it to D&D, but if it was, I would be very worried about creating characters and playing the game in the same session, especially with zero prep. But with Daggerheart, I handed out the cards, I handed out all the information and the character sheets, and we were up and running in, honestly, 25 minutes. The hardest thing in Daggerheart I found for players to kind of think about is just their experience. All player characters have experiences that they choose themselves, which can give them a +2 bonus to certain roles if you can kind of convince the GM that that experience applies. They're really fun, but they can stump players sometimes. But I find having like a list of default ones that the players can kind of choose and make their own really does help. And at the end of the day, they're not that important to like a one-shot. And then I went through the motions of doing the one-shot in the Daggerheart book, which says something along the lines of your players are in the land of blank, and then your players, give you the name of the kingdom. There are some options in the book that you can take. Then it's like, the paraphrasing here, an event happens or something happened the night before. What was it? Now the players have to leave and go somewhere else to do something. What do they need to do and where do they need to go to do it? It's a template that sets up a campaign really well because it gets it to its core points, which is the players are together. Something happens that means they have to go do something. They go do that something. Now, it goes into much more detail with the template. You can really build out more of a story and a world just from those prompts. But my players immediately ran with it. I guess I never really thought about it before, but I think a lot of players out there, especially around my table who are forever players, who don't normally get to run a TTRPG game because they don't want to, they don't want the responsibility, but they kind of do want to build a world. They kind of do want to craft a story and have a bit more say on these things. I've not heard that many people talk about this, but I think a lot of players out there, and certainly I find it at my table, jump at the chance to build the world with the GM. So yeah, almost instantly, I had one player shout out, maybe we could do a pirate campaign. And I had another player being like, pirate campaign, I second that. And then they were building out their boat and what it's called. This one was made out of mushrooms because one of the characters was a fungi. It was a whole thing. But honestly, we had the characters and we had like a story and like mini one shot, the start of it built out within 45 minutes. It went way smoother than I ever thought possible. And I asked my players afterwards if they enjoyed it and they all said the same thing. They were like so surprised how fast and easy it came together and how fun it was to play. Now, there is a caveat here, and that was I also surprised myself at how good I was at improvising a story. I have been playing Daggerheart for, like I said, over a year at this point, and I've played D&D for much, much longer. And I was at a table with friends who I knew wouldn't, judge me or would be patient with me. I was very open and honest throughout the whole session that we were all just making it up on the spot. So people were understanding if you don't have that kind of experience or that kind of like friend group, this might not go as well for you. But for me, with the players, we decided they were on a boat. Last night, a cleric had been kidnapped and they had to go rescue the cleric. So I, as you would say in Daggerheart, I just followed the fiction, followed the narrative of what made sense to me in that moment. It's a pirate-themed adventure. We had a genre. I wanted a pirate ship battle. I started with that. I had another ship try to board the player's ship, and I used those kind of lackey adversaries that I got before, the leader, the standards, the minions, and I just had a little fun battle. Taught the new players how to play Daggerheart. The more experienced players had a blast. and they commandeered a second bigger ship. So now they had 2 ships. Then they headed to a few more places that I made up on the spot and ended in a cave in an island fighting a demon that I had prepared beforehand. Defeated the demon, and before I knew it as GM, the session was over. It went so fast because I was having so much fun. And I think that's the best way to describe Daggerheart compared to D&D, which is the other game I have the most experience in, is that when I DM D&D, I'm having fun still, but it is like stress, like competitive stress almost. Like if I'm playing a competitive computer game, I want to feel tense. I want to feel a little bit sweaty. That's kind of what D&D is for me. In D&D, I'm like managing so much stuff. I'm trying my hardest to keep everything perfect, especially in combat. I'm keeping track of like just so many different things that by the end of a D&D game, I'm kind of like, phew, that was great, but like relieved it's over. Did everyone have fun? I had fun. Did everyone have fun? But by the end of a Daggerheart game, I'm like, I could keep going. This is great. It's a very different feeling. And there's a few reasons for that as well. And I think the biggest one for me is that I can say at the start of a Daggerheart game, this is a more collaborative game. So I can lean on the players more when I need to, or just when I don't want to think of something on the spot. In Daggerheart, there is just a vibe at the table where the players understand that I'm not a god, I'm more of a player with them. And I even had one of the players who I used to play D&D with, who's never played Daggerheart before, at that game tell me, you just looks like you are having more fun. It looks more fun to GM. Because I had resources, I was spending them, I was explaining things, and it's true. I think it just is more fun to GM when it comes to stuff like that. Now, one criticism of Daggerheart I would have is that I don't think there is like enough classes. I kind of wish there were more. Like, I think there's a good amount of like species, the ancestries, but there's just something about the classes. I just wish there was like 1 or 2 more. But we kind of countered that by using the playtest materials that are free online right now. I had one player play a Blood Hunter and I had another player play a Brawler, and they had a blast with those, even though one of them really seemed overpowered. But even with all those options, I still had one player who really wanted to play someone who had a huge cannon on their shoulder and fired explosives. They wanted more of like an artificer class. And we managed to get around it. They went wizard, they went sorcerer, and then we reflavored their weapon. And I was just a kind of a generous DM, allowing things to explode occasionally. And that is much easier to do in Daggerheart for me than other TTRPGs, simply because the characters are actually very, very simple in what they can do. So reflavoring stuff isn't this big, huge thing that's going to like break other things. Sometimes it is just about saying, oh yeah, that magic staff is actually a gun, and it will work. Now, all this stuff I'm talking about, you can do in D&D. Don't get me wrong, but not, as written. It's not obvious. And I know a lot of people who play it don't even think like that. But with Daggerheart, it's kind of built with that intention to be used that way, to like make it your own. And I'm sure as soon as May hits, which isn't that long away, when we get the new book, and the following books after that, that will fix my issue with there not being enough subclasses. And honestly, it's not that much of an issue. It's just that I played it a lot and I want to play everything and try everything. So you run out of stuff fast that way. But if you want to just run like a 3-year campaign with these, you'd be fine. But at level 1, yeah, I had the player who wanted to play an artificer, and we couldn't really get close to that with a class. And I also had another player who wanted to play a full support healing subclass, and there's not really one of those either. You get close, like with the druid and with the seraph maybe, but they're really not built out to be obvious healers, which I think is on purpose, because who wants to just be stuck being a healer? But I certainly had players who said they wished there was more of a class like that. Now, I want to talk about the systems in place, the mechanics. Certainly as a GM, which is, where I've spent 100% of my time, I do think there is a bit of a learning curve with using fear in this game. It's a little bit confusing. Fear is kind of just a promise. It's like money as a currency in the real world. Like, if I hold up a $10 bill and I say, this is worth something, and someone else, that's just a piece of paper. What are you talking about? But it's kind of like, because we have an agreement that it's worth something, then it's money. And it's very, important. That's kind of what fear is in the game. The reality is the GM can do whatever they want. The fear is just there to like help ease things along and be more fun. And it is like I think the players love seeing the fear go up and down. I, as a GM, love using fear to do things. I feel less bad than when I do in, say, D&D. But at the end of the day, I could just do stuff whenever I wanted to, So we really are just agreeing that the fear means something. And then sometimes we will, overrule it. But for me, the true joy in the game isn't the fear mechanic or like the hope mechanic or the stress from the player's point of view. Having all those resources on the player sheet, I do think is a lot of fun. It does make it a little bit more video gamey. Like you've got like a lot of like stamina meters and health bars and things like that, which I, for one, just kind of enjoy. There's a reason why so many video games are like that. It's because it's fun and it works and it's a great way to get information across. So I'm kind of a big fan of it in here. It is a lot of like writing and drawing and, erasing stuff on the character sheet, but I've not heard any player really have too much of an issue with it. But for me, truly, the best thing is the duality dice. Something that when I first got Daggerheart, I thought was a little bit of a gimmick. Rolling 2d12s is just kind of fun. You add them together, you succeed or not. And then you have this other like story-based part of it with which rolled higher, the hope or fear dice. I generally thought like it was still going to play very similarly to something like D&D, but it really doesn't. I genuinely been impressed with myself when the players roll with fear and I have to decide on a consequence in a moment, and I'll just decide on something and it'll become integral to the story from that point onwards. And this is where I think some DMs from D&D might like bounce off Daggerheart a little bit, because it is more work to run. You are coming up with a lot more stuff. You're improvising a lot more. You are coming up with more outcomes from rolls. You simply are. There are a lot of D&D DMs out there who grade on a scale. So like if you roll with a 5, something happens. If you roll with a 10, something else happens. If you roll with a 15, you succeed by this much. And if you roll with a 20, you succeed. Those people will be more at home here. It's kind of built into the system more to do that. But there will be some DMs who it's just a little bit too much for. But what I will say is, if you enjoy DMing D&D and you've put yourself in that position and you're experienced in it, this won't be an issue for you. Like, certainly for me anyway, I've realized like that was a part of D&D I enjoyed. If you're sitting in the DM chair and you're like, no, don't give me more improvisation. Don't give me more options that I have to come up with on the fly. I maybe think, do you really want to be in the DM chair at all? But, it does feel like a little bit more work to come up with things. That being said, like I said, the more laid back nature of the game is that sometimes if I can't come up with anything for like a roll with fear, I can just ask the players if they can think of anything. Or I sometimes just say, I'm going to hold on to this and this consequence is going to like show up later down the line, and I'll tell you when it does, because those opportunities always, show themselves. But definitely, coming up with more options when you roll, just trying to spend fear in general, you are like using more of your brain than in D&D. D&D actually feels, for me at least, you're a little bit more in autopilot, right? You could play D&D, just, the rules and you just go down some generic story path. You do a little bit of improvisation and you make the players roll a lot, and, they fail or succeed based on those rolls. Like, I think D&D, if you choose it to be, is like easier to run, yet more stressful, if that makes sense. And Daggerheart is slightly harder to run, but more laid back. But the bonus is that the extra complexity in Daggerheart leads to more compelling stories and narratives and memorable moments than D&D does, which, is the huge win for me. There's also a bunch of other small things in Daggerheart that I personally just prefer. For example, when you take long rests, you can only choose 2 things to do out of a selection of 5, which makes long rests much more meaningful in Daggerheart and makes the players think about it a lot more. It's the same with death moves. If a player goes down, they can choose from 3 different moves, which is just so much fun depending on what they choose. And also just built in to the mechanics of the game itself, from like the player options and abilities to using like tag team abilities and spending hope to help other players. This game just pushes the players to be more collaborative, to like help each other and work together as a team, that I love, and it works as well. One thing I will say that I think I've seen other people talk about is the idea that Daggerheart is for, role players and theatre kids. And I'm sure that, that could be true for some tables. I'm sure they enjoy it. I have to say that actually, I've had games with very little roleplay. Like when I play with players who aren't into role-playing or not confident enough yet, they just don't roleplay that much. And the game's still a blast, right? So it's not like it's like necessary to want to roleplay or be a theater kid. And, don't forget D&D is, a role-playing game as well. So it's like, with both games, you can put in as much as you want on that regard and get out what you want. Now, when the book first came out and when I reviewed it and when a ton of people reviewed it, they talked a lot about like the campaign frames being really, really cool. I've come a little bit full circle on that. They are very cool, but when I think about how much I've used them over the past year, barely at all. They're like fun. I personally would still love a full setting book. I don't know if they're ever planning to do that. That's just what I want. I want a little bit more complexity in the world building stuff, so I can take inspiration from that. And also, while we're like talking about complexity, to be critical of the game system again, sometimes I do wish the rules were a little bit more complex. Sometimes I do miss that giant list on a D&D character sheet of all the different things you can do, like animal handling and medicine and religion. Sometimes I do miss that little bit more precision, but I think 98% of players will prefer the simplicity of this when it comes to reading your character sheet and using abilities and things. One of the most legitimate criticisms I've seen levied at Daggerheart is that the combat's not very tactical, and that is true. That is very, very true. The combat can still be fun. It can still be tactical, but if you're comparing it to D&D, which is like a combat-first game, turn-based, giant list of stuff you can do, D&D combat is just more tactical. But Daggerheart is just more cinematic. Like the flow of combat in this game and outside of combat, and fundamentally combat and outside of combat are the same thing. The flow has a rhythm to it. To the point now where when I play D&D, as much as I sometimes enjoy very tactical combat, like, I can move 3 squares, but that will only get me to here. But if I use this spell, maybe I can just reach them. That's fun and all, but I hate how locked into combat you are in D&D. And the freedom in Daggerheart to just come in and out of it or never start it in the first place, while one other player does, is so fun to me. The fact that a player can ask me like, how much time has passed since combat started? And in Daggerheart, I can just say, it doesn't matter. I've watched anime where they've spent 5 minutes in a 4-second interval and then 3 seconds on the next hour. Now, if the player has a reason for asking that, you just need to find out what they want to know that information for and, let them do the cool thing they want to do, whatever it may be. But the lack of complexity is both a pro and a con in my eyes for this game, depending on what kind of player or GM you are. And then I think I've covered most of the stuff I wanted to talk about. I am just doing this off the cuff, so I may miss stuff. I will be live on Twitch right now. I'll be live for the next few hours after this video goes live. So if you wanted to come and discuss it more and we can go more in depth about it, we can do, come say hi. But I think, the only other thing I really want to talk about is the adversaries. The adversaries in Daggerheart, I love. I also love them in the new D&D monster manual as well. But there's the simplicities of the ones in Daggerheart, which just, I am much more likely to use the tools in this book for improvising adversaries and just make up one on the fly during a game than I ever would in D&D. And I used to do that in D&D a lot. I would not want to prep stuff like that. And if the players wanted to fight someone, I would just quickly, jot down some basic stats for it and go with it. But it never led to like a compelling fight. But with Daggerheart, it's so easy to put together a really cool adversary just in the moment. You can even, I've not done this, but maybe I will, ask your players to chip in, You could be like, oh, cool, you're going to, you're choosing to fight this weird monster that you've just come across. I'm going to look at this table on the back of my GM screen, and I'm going to get like its hit points, its stress, its thresholds, and all that stuff. I'm going to find out exactly what it can do for its standard attack, how much damage, range, all that stuff. But players, do you think this monster would have any cool abilities? What could this monster do that would like scare you guys? And, a player will say something that you love. All the other players might be like, stop. But you'll get that one person and then you'll add it and then you'll kill that player with the ability they made up. But, the thought I'll leave you with is one I had after this one shot we did. And that was, I genuinely, if I had the paperwork, right? If I easily had the cards sorted out, or I had enough character sheets, if I had friends just visit my house just for a coffee or something, or for a board game night, and we had a couple of hours, I could run a one-shot of Daggerheart at the drop of a hat. And it would be fun. It would be good. No prep, no module, no nothing. I would need the Daggerheart core rulebook, but to go from like true player game Have you guys ever played Daggerheart? Do you have 3 hours? Let's do it and be playing Daggerheart. I can't think of a scenario that could ever happen with something like D&D, you know? From deciding to play, to making the characters at the table, to your players helping craft the one-shot, to playing it in its entirety, I could totally see myself doing that with Daggerheart. And yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those things. And if you asked me to DM a game of D&D tonight, I'd panic. I'd be like, oh God, what am I going to do? How am I going to do it? But if you asked me to GM a game of Daggerheart tonight, I'd be like, yeah, sure. I'll be there. Let me know when. As for its future, because I won't lie to you guys, I got a little bit worried there for a second. I was uncertain of the future of Daggerheart when it first came out and it blew up and it was all over YouTube. It was all over the internet. Everyone was talking about it. Everyone was liking it, to, Critical Role being campaign for D&D, to the past few months, people just talking about Daggerheart less and less, and I could see views on my videos going down and down and down. I was beginning to think that maybe it might just kind of, become one of those niche games and just coast out on like a small player base. But then with the, announcements over the past couple of weeks, and I've watched hype pick back up for it, it's definitely not there yet. It's not like, that household name. It may never be on the same level as D&D, but something like Pathfinder, for example, to put in a language that in my head I understand, if you can make like a D&D video and get 50k views on that video, then you can make a Pathfinder video and get 20k views on it. Then you can make a Daggerheart video right now and get, 5k views on it. So it's definitely like not got like that much interest in it that I can tell. Certainly not in like the YouTube space where I spend most of my time. But Darrington Press and Critical Role genuinely seem to have a plan for this. And every time they do one of these announcements, they bring in like thousands of new people. And I think it's still going to be a little bit quiet for the next 6 months or so. But once they release Hope and Fear, their new book coming out in May, and then once they release their Jeremy Crawford and Chris Perkins book coming out not too long after that, and once like third-party partnered books like the Dragonheim book come out, I can see another kind of vortex happening that, where hype just keeps picking up, like what happened when it first came out, especially if they announce like Age of Umber Season 2, the Critical Role Daggerheart campaign. I can see it like taking off again. And if it does manage to get more of a foothold in the industry, which I think it will do, I'm hopeful that in, 3 years' time, Critical Role Campaign 5 will be a Daggerheart campaign. And if that happens, wow, we're off to the races. I do think, and I know we don't know this for sure, and I know there's a lot of people who don't believe it at all, but I do think Critical Role going with D&D over Daggerheart did slow the hype train to a crawl. But they're doing stuff properly and well. I say all the time, the PR company that Critical Role uses are fantastic. They know what they're doing. They're just going to keep picking up more and more speed now, and the hype train is going to get back up to where it was and beyond. At least I'm, optimistic that is what's going to happen. The thing is, either way though, the fact that even when I have a D&D channel, which, I rely on to pay for my rent, that I still make videos on, and I'm still keeping tabs on everything D&D, and I'm still occasionally playing it, even though Daggerheart slowed right down and isn't getting any views, I still am desperate to play the game and make videos about it. And that's the biggest sign for me. Like, it would be smarter financially for me to not play Daggerheart and just keep playing D&D and pumping out 2 times the videos on that. Yet I can't bring myself to stop playing Daggerheart. I'm going to presume that if you have watched this video all the way to the end, thank you. You're a maniac. Type the end in the comments, just because this is a much slower, probably boring video where I'm just chatting. But I'm going to presume if you got to the end that you're already a fan of Daggerheart. I don't know why you would watch this video if you thought it was bad or just didn't know much about it. But if you are someone who doesn't know much about it or is unsure whether they should like buy it or try it, I think this book is just a fantastic book to have. Anyway, I think reading through this will make you better at other TTRPGs, and you get a cool deck of cards, and it's cheaper than like a D&D book. I can't guarantee that you'll like it, but I can say there's a very, very, very high chance that you are going to like Daggerheart. And if I asked my players what they would rate it, they'd probably say a mix of 8s and 9s out of 10. Maybe out of the 10 people I've played with, 2 of them would probably prefer D&D, and 1 of them did not like Daggerheart at all. They just did not like it. But the other 7 people, huge fans of it. And when you throw my, 9 out of 10 score that I'd probably give it right now onto it, then yeah, you end up with a really solid score. It's probably around, pulling it out of my bum, 8 out of 10. But we know these numbers don't really mean anything anyway. But that's just my way of trying to get across how fond of this game system I am. Oh, I should also just talk about the fact that outside of the game itself as well, the way Down Express are running things is really cool. The fact that you can go online to their playtesting section on their site and download 5 new subclasses, or say 5 new classes, many subclasses, a bunch of new adversaries, and those transformation cards as well, is so cool. It's like a free expansion to the book. So yeah, very few downsides, all upsides from me at least. And yeah, go to Twitch right now. Go to Twitch right now, follow me, and say hi if I'm live. I'm probably going to be actually prepping my next session on stream, which won't take me very long because prep's easy with Daggerheart. I'm sure I missed something really important to talk about, but oh well, you can just make fun of me in the comments. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you've enjoyed this kind of more laid back, slower, lazy video